Our next speaker, David Strickland, before serving NHTSA, served for 8 years on the staff of the Senate Commerce Committee. And as senior counsel for the Consumer Product Subcommittee, he was lead staff person for the oversight of NHTSA, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Consumer Product Safety Commission. His work advising the Commerce Committee members led to the inclusion of several significant vehicle safety mandates, including electronic stability control mandate for every passenger safety vehicle. As NHTSA administrator, he's been committed to protecting the safety of our most vulnerable road users, children, teens, and seniors. Working with public and private entities, he has worked hard to tackle the growing problem of distracted driving. He's an energetic safety advocate, and he's an important partner for all of us in senior driver safety. Please welcome David Strickland.
Thank you, Kathleen.
You're right, Deb, that is jazzy music. Good afternoon, everyone. How are you doing today? This is something that is very important to my staff, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, in how we work through the issue of supporting and integrating and keeping safe elderly drivers. It really is an opportunity for us in the greatest sense in terms of the number of elderly drivers that will be entering into their later years. And as both Kathleen and Debbie mentioned, people are healthier, they're living longer, and they are more active. And the great contrast in terms of livability in society and policy is how we can allow seniors to keep their independence. And one of the core parts of independence is individual mobility. And how we can do that so that these seniors can drive safely, and we have the opportunity to sort of recognize when anyone's faculties, whether they're young or old, when they're not fully capable of maintaining the driving task. And that's the real great thing about the notion of the work of ITS into the longer term stretch, as the chairman mentioned, autonomy in driving. Because that's the one thing where you have the intersection. Kathleen mentioned that most seniors are not living in urban centers where they have access to transit and to taxis. But they still have the same needs of being independent. They still want to be able to run their errands, visit friends, conduct business. And right now, there is that break point where a senior driver may no longer have the ability to maintain the driving task as they should. And it's interesting in the work that we've done at the Department of Transportation and at NHTSA is that we see that seniors, as already mentioned by Kathleen and by Debbie, is that they're fantastic in terms of actual driver risk. These people, they actually have great speed control. They wear their belts. They usually make a great effort to drive where they're. Frankly, they are almost our best proponents of what we do in our behavioral program at NHTSA. I wish we could replicate what elderly drivers do to, frankly, the rest of the driving population. We would all be better off. But the issues that we have is that, as everyone knows, we decline as we age, and we all decline at different rates. And the interesting thing is that seniors recognize this themselves, and they even begin to self-regulate. You'll see, I know of my folks are even making these decisions. They don't like to drive at night. They don't like to drive when the weather is inclement. They do their best to drive to avoid rush hour, or especially, highways where people drive in high rates of speed. So even, seniors themselves are beginning to recognize and adjust their own driving behavior. But there is often the point where a child will have to deal with a very difficult situation, which is having a conversation with their parents that we can no longer allow you to drive by yourself. And I will tell you that is clearly one of the most difficult conversations that any family has. So in the greater overarch of what we do from a policy standpoint, to talk about our work at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the hard work of the National Transportation Safety Board, all of our safety partners around the country, including AAA and all the states, in terms of how we sort of find a way to sort of bridge this gap of having people still being able to enjoy individual mobility in a safe way. And having autonomous driving as that bridge to the ability to maintain individual mobility as needed really does hold great promise for all of us in making a better quality of life for our parents and our grandparents and on into the future. So it really is a fantastic task, and a great sort of call, as the chairman mentioned, is for intelligent transportation systems to think about how we integrate these systems to support the older driver going forward. Now, along with our work with all of our strategic partners, that we're taking a look at a lot of the things that recognizing in dealing with frailty and fragility and how we think about improving vehicle design, not only for drivers, but for pedestrians and for passengers. Now, at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, we have had a long-standing coordinated research and development program for older drivers. And earlier this year, we established a new older driver team to coordinate and plan the agency's activities for older drivers, older pedestrians, and passengers as well. Now, our agency will focus on efforts in crash prevention and mitigation with specific activities based on this team's recommendations. Intelligent transport technologies will be a key element in our efforts on both the crash prevention side and on the mitigation side. Now, ITS holds great promise for improving the safety of all drivers of all ages, from advanced crash avoidance technologies to lane departure warnings. Through the future of interconnected systems of vehicles that talk to each other into the infrastructure, we see major gains in highway safety from the widespread implementation of ITS. Most importantly, these technologies will help prevent the crash from happening in the first place, which is the ideal solution for older drivers and for pedestrians. At the end of the day, we're going to work very hard to make sure that we design vehicles and help work with the manufacturers to protect the full span of people that are going to be riding and driving these vehicles. But the one cure-all for all of these scenarios is this: if you don't have a crash, you don't have to deal with the issues of how we spread crash forces across the body in a wider fashion, how we can possibly have pre-charge systems to do things to help mitigate injury. And some of the technology that you'll see out on the test pad out of the Disney World Speedway, what you're seeing out of the technology showcase, really does show a future of how crash imminent braking, how lane keeping assist systems, how active cruise control, all of these elements together at this stage, which we are seeing deployed in the fleet right now, how they evolve in the years to come, leading to such great ideas as the fully autonomous vehicle, which the Google car and other competitors that are working the same idea. I know that that Alan Todd did a great job talking about the work that GM has done yesterday, and I actually remember seeing a clip from the 1964 New York World's Fair where you had interconnected vehicles platooning along and embedded signals along a highway. This is something now where we're seeing the technology, whether it's from the individual manufacturers or the support of vehicle-to-vehicle technology that's supported by the department. The day is quickly coming where we will see these improvements throughout the fleet. Now, as all of these wonderful technologies are coming into the fleet and the provision of information is also coming into the fleet, it does create the risk of possibly overwhelming a driver. And especially so when I hear, more anecdotally about senior drivers who are facing these newer systems when they buy a brand new car. They often feel overwhelmed by the amount of information that's coming at them. The odd lights, the sign, they are used to a car that really did have a much more basic functionality, which is an interesting contrast, because now as we're having younger and younger people that are demanding more connectivity, more information being brought into the cabin, and that's what they are asking for, we're actually leveraging issues against a population that really did appreciate a car that did not have as much coming at them. So we all have to think about the human-machine interface and how we can sort of balance what we are able to do and what we can offer commercially and even what we support, as an administration and as a government, versus a population which frankly did not grow up with this stuff. and I would probably put myself on the more tech-savvy end of the universe. And even some of the things, even for me, I can personally say that, you definitely have a learning curve. You used to be able to just get into a new car and drive. I read manuals now. And frankly, it's one of these things that we're working with. I know that AAA and other organizations in terms of older driver clinics and actually trying to get senior drivers more familiar with these systems. So it's as much technology as it is, culturalization and sort of helping people sort of appreciate these systems going forward. Now, dealing with the potential of distraction, we have our ongoing guideline work at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which is going hand in hand with our work for in-vehicle connectivity and communications. Now, our initial focus is developing guidelines for visual and manual interfaces for in-vehicle technologies, devices and systems in the car at the time that it's manufactured. These guidelines will recommend criteria that manufacturers can use to ensure that the systems or devices in the cars and light trucks are unlikely to cause the driver to engage in tasks not directly related to the task of driving. Vehicle-based distractions are problematic, but we are facing a new world with portable devices, and they pose more driver risk for distraction. In many cases, the interfaces on these devices, pick your Android phone or your iPhone, they are fantastic and they're fast, but they are not made to be used in the driving environment. But on the other hand, they have applications embedded in them that are meant to be used in the driving environment. So that's clearly a clash and an intersection that has to be dealt with going forward. The third and final phase of our guidelines will address the voice-activated controls that would further minimize distraction. Now, these guidelines should help you consider the safety needs of older users of these technologies. Now, as I said in the opening, we at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Department of Transportation as a whole, our sister agencies, the Research and Innovative Technologies Administration, the Motor Carrier Safety Administration, Federal Transit Administration, we all are working together to be able to leverage and use intelligent transportation systems to make a safer and a greener means of national transportation. But clearly, we all have a lot of collective work to do together, and especially in the space where we're trying to serve our most responsible and our most needed population, our seniors. They're the ones that have taught us everything that we know how to do. And the fact that we can possibly move transportation in a pace where they can actually continue to enjoy their independence going forward, even beyond their physical capabilities of managing the driving task, I think it's something that is a worthwhile goal for all of us to support, work on, and embrace. Thank you so much.